Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen meeting for Monday, February the 24th, 2020. All aldermen are present and accounted for this evening. We welcome all of those that are in attendance this evening, and we are glad that you're here with us to be part of governing here in Germantown. The agenda is pretty straightforward this evening. I will make an announcement at this meeting and at the next meeting as well. The regularly scheduled meeting for Monday, March the 23rd will be canceled due to several of the department heads being out of town for that particular meeting. This evening, our invocation will be led by Public Works Director Bo Mills. Our pledge will be led by Alderman Massey. Please rise.
Let us pray. Gracious God, it's been such a good day, and you've given us so many gifts. What a great place to live and work and play that you provided for us here. Help us to never take that for granted and to think of others that are in need that we can be of help to. We just thank you for this great city, for these that serve, these that are elected, these that are part of our staff, Lord, that are here tonight to conduct the business of this great city. We just ask for your blessings, your wisdom, your guidance, and your direction. We thank you for your healing power, your forgiving grace, and your love. We pray in your precious name. Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. That brings us to item 4 on the agenda, setting and adopting the agenda for this evening's meeting. The board met in executive session at 5:30 this evening and thoroughly reviewed the agenda, going over the preliminary and the regular agenda at that time, also reviewing the minutes as well. During that particular meeting, there was a desire by the board to move regular agenda item 10, 2020 legislative agenda to the preliminary agenda, and that would be item D, will be now item 10 on the agenda. Is there a motion to approve and adopt the modified agenda as just presented?
Move to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Alderman Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey? Yes. Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Yonda?
Yes. The agenda has been set and adopted for this evening. That brings us to item 5 on the agenda, approval of the minutes from the regularly scheduled meeting of February the 10th, 2020. During executive session, there were no corrections or additions to the minutes. Are there any at this time? Seeing none, is there a motion to adopt the minutes of the February 10th meeting as presented to the public?
Move to approve.
Second.
There's a motion by the Vice Mayor and a second by Alderman Sanders. Please call the roll.
Alderman Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey? Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
The minutes from the February 10th meeting have been adopted. That brings us to item 6 on the agenda, citizens to be heard. Clerk or city administrator, do we have anyone? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to grab a sheet real quick and speak during citizens to be heard? See no one race to the door, I'll take that as a no. That concludes citizens to be heard for this evening and takes us to item 7 on the agenda, special recognition. Germantown Education Commission Teacher of the Month for February of 2020. Alderman Mary Ann Gibson will make that presentation.
Thank you, sir. If I could have Mr. Tim Boyer come forward, and then members of the Education Commission, Manjeet Kaur, Kyle Eaton. Tim Boyer's reputation for having a contagious, positive attitude is well deserved. As Houston High's beloved marketing, advertising, PR, and retail operations teacher, Mr. Boyer is well respected by students, parents, and coworkers. In the classroom, he works hard to find the balance for each student by using multiple teaching strategies and real work experiences to create lessons that are both approachable and challenging. His teaching methods are relatable, and his experience narrative helps prepare students for the real world. Mr. Boyer strives to find personal connections with each of his students. He calls each by name and greets them with a smile and a firm handshake. After the school day is done, in his role as DECA sponsor, Mr. Boyer works tirelessly to prepare students for various state, local, and national competitions. He can be found at the front of the student section at most Houston High football games and serves as the sponsor for both boys and girls lacrosse teams. Mr. Boyer attends soccer, volleyball, and soccer games. He supports students at Battle of the Brains and in concerts and plays throughout the year. His love for Houston High is apparent, and there's for you. The best part, he is there because he wants to be, and the kids know it. In the community, Tim Boyer is an active member of Christ the King Church and is involved in community ministries, including Room at the Inn and Calvary Rescue Mission. Mr. Boyer, please accept our appreciation for your commitment to Germantown students and to excellence every day. Thank you.
Mr. Boyer, Coach Boyer, we appreciate your dedicated service to our students at Houston High School on the lacrosse fields as well, and at DECA and Battle of the Brains, and the list goes on, and we cannot pay you enough compliments, and we are just glad that you serve our students and our children. Thank you so much, and thank you to our Education Commission for recognizing you. That brings us to item 7B on the agenda, and that would be a proclamation celebrating Arbor Day in the city of Germantown. I'll read the proclamation into the record, and we will eventually celebrate Arbor Day just around the corner. Whereas our nation continues a long-standing tradition of setting aside a special day for the planting of trees. And this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in 1872. And whereas in Germantown, our city has been blessed with a plentiful number and variety of trees. They have added beauty to our landscape, added a touch of nature to our streetscapes and residential properties, and provided our citizens with places of beauty to find wholesome recreation. And whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. And whereas the city of Germantown has expanded our commitment to tree conservation through our tree inventory data collection system, the establishment of a Level 2 Arboretum at Oak Lawn Gardens, a partnership with the Tennessee chapter of the Nature Conservancy to implement their national educational tree program called If Trees Could Sing, and whereas the Germantown citizens are invited to participate in a free dogwood tree giveaway and annual fruit tree sale to benefit Germantown beautification projects from 9 to 11 on Friday, March the 6th at the Germantown Crossing Shopping Center, and from 12 to 2 p.m. at the Bobby Lanier Farm Park. And whereas the Germantown Tree Board and Beautification Commission invite everyone to support the city's 30th anniversary of being designated a Tree City USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation and a new international designation as Tree City of the World by the Food and Drug Organization of the United Nations by participating in these community events. Now, therefore, I, Mike Palazzolo, Mayor of the City of Germantown, Tennessee, do hereby proclaim Friday, March 6, 2020, as the 148th anniversary celebration of Arbor Day. In our country, I urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day in Germantown and to support the efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. Round of applause for Arbor Day. I believe our Parks Director has brought information that's out on Peoples Street. That's right outside the doors here in the council chambers. We encourage all of you to participate in Arbor Day. We are thankful, Alderman Sanders, to the Beautification Commission for their support and leadership there. And I think one thing we left out with the proclamation is this past year we adopted a pretty robust tree plan for any new development. So even more proof that we are dedicated to Arbor Day and to preserving trees in our community. That brings us to item 8 on the agenda this evening, the Alderman Liaison reports. Each alderman serves one of our 25 or multiple of our 25 boards and commissions, and each month they present a short report on those events. We go from position 1 through 5. Alderman Sanders.
I have no report tonight, Mayor.
Oh, thank you, Alderman. Alderman Gibson.
Thank you, Mayor. This past Saturday, the Education Commission held Battle of the Brains, their annual science, technology, engineering, and math competition, where we had over 50 teams of Germantown's best and brightest students vying for the coveted Einstein Trophy. We welcome students from Houston High and Germantown High Schools, as well as several area private high schools. As you know, events like these don't happen without the partnerships with Germantown Municipal Schools and through the hard work of teachers and staff at Houston High, as well as the tireless efforts of the Education Commission members who oversaw every detail of the event: logistics, judging, awards, and programming. Anyone who's ever worked with students, and especially bright and energetic academics, it's much like herding cats at times. From Chairman Natalie Williams to the event chairman Steve Chandler, Sean Lane, Manjit Kaur, Kyle Eaton, Barb Boyer, Dr. Patricia Tormina, and every member who carried the weight of ensuring that the day was fun and informative, we thank you. The library board's new conference, they can announce the new conference room construction is complete and is being prepared for the community to begin using as early as this week. One of the unexpected benefits that came from the creation of more space for educational and community events has been that the adjacent quiet room has become even quieter. We've received just over $9,000 in donated funds to go toward new furnishings, so expect an open invitation once we officially open this new community space, and thank those partners who helped make this possible. Parks and Recreation hosted a community engagement meeting for the reinvestment of Germantown Station and Riverdale Parks after months of community input and online surveys to review proposed designs to upgrade both parks and to hear directly from residents. That's my report.
Thank you, Alderman Gibson. Alderman Massey. Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Owens.
Mayor, none of my commissions actually have met since the last time we gave a report, so I have no report as well.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Yonda.
Thank you, Mayor. The Personnel Advisory Commission met on Thursday, February 20th to review and approve the annual plan of action for 2020. They set a tentative schedule of upcoming meetings with topics including employee compensation and the consideration of a performance-based merit pay pool for the FY21 budget. The Commission also discussed a new health plan and will review it as well for any enhancements or other changes in calendar 2021. They were also briefed on the new Wellness Champions initiative led by Human Resources and employees from other departments with a similar passion for healthier living. This group will emphasize prevention and encourage physical fitness, healthier eating, and stress management through group and individual events and continuing education. All 7 Citizen Volunteer Commission members attended, an excellent start for the new year. I also have an environmental. We had our meeting 2 weeks ago, and we worked on how to cut back and cut down on single-use plastics at home. We also discussed in detail some of the recycling problems that we were running into in terms of it being an expense versus some minor revenue to the fund. In FY19, the expense was $210,638, whereas in FY14 we had a revenue of $60,000. So there's been quite a change in that. Hopefully we'll come up with some ideas that might help us in that area. Also, we discussed the April 18th Amnesty Day, so everyone needs to remember April 18th, that's the 3rd Saturday in April. Also, I have a task force liaison report. This is the Cellular Service Public Safety Task Force, this is the mayor's. We are meeting bi-monthly to discuss ways to improve cellular service in Germantown. The task force discussed the current state of cell service in Germantown, is meeting with representatives from wireless industry, and is looking at some specific opportunities for improvements. I'll be giving you some reports in the future about what improvements we're looking towards, and of course we have a final report to give to the mayor and administration. That's all of them, Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And just briefly from the mayor's office, the city will be represented in Nashville at the General Assembly on Thursday to be recognized and acknowledged by the Senate and by the House of Representatives as the Malcolm Baldrige National Service Quality Award winner, and so we are excited to be there to receive those recognitions and proclamations as well. That concludes the Alderman Liaison reports for this evening. We now move to item 9 on the agenda, the preliminary agenda. As mentioned earlier, the preliminary agenda was thoroughly reviewed during executive session. At that time, there was one item that was moved, and then also during the adoption of or setting the agenda and adopting the agenda, that item was moved and became item D. I'll read those items into the public record. Item A, 9A, appointment, Shelby County Board of Equalization. Item 9B, appointments, Germantown Education Foundation. Item 9C, competitive seal proposal authorization for recreation software and well pumps rehabilitation. And item 9D, 2020 legislative agenda. Is there a motion to approve the preliminary agenda as modified?
Move
So
to
moved.
approved.
There's a motion by Alderman Gibson, a second by Alderman Sanders. Please call the roll.
Alderman Massey? Yes. Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Alderman Gibson?
Yes.
The preliminary agenda has been approved. I would point that several of the current board members of the Germantown Education Foundation are here in attendance this evening. Also, their newly appointed executive director, Robin Rudisill, is here as well. We welcome you to your new role. As a disclaimer and full transparency, I'm a member of that board as well. So the 3 new board members, welcome to the foundation, and I will say, like as I usually do, at this point in time, you can stay and watch, and we encourage you to if you like, or you can go home and start dinner and maybe start some homework assignments and those type things. So this is your time. If you'd like to leave the room, you can do so quietly. Thank you, and congratulations again to the 3 new members. That brings us to item 11, or also our regular agenda this evening. Item 11 on the agenda is revised agreement, GMSD and Taylor Land Investors Land Exchange. Assistant City Administrator Jason Heisman will make that presentation. Mr. Heisman.
Mayor and Board, since the BMA meeting on January 13th of this year, City staff has been working with the Germantown Municipal School District and developer John Duke, who is a partner with Taylor Land Investors, on an alternative 3-party land exchange agreement. Our objective throughout the process was to put together an agreement that would advance the planning objectives of all parties involved. And we believe what you have before you this evening accomplishes just that. A total of 4 parcels have been identified for consideration in the revised agreement. These parcels are currently within Houston Levy Park, the land to the east of Forest Hill Elementary, and 5 acres adjacent to the Norfolk Southern Railroad, just to the east of Forest Hill Irene Road. If I turn it on, that would help. Under the terms of the proposed land exchange agreement, 21.8 acres of the city's Houston Levy Park, which is referred to in the agreement as the first parcel, would be deeded by the city to the school district. The school district intends to make the northernmost field their home field for their girls' softball program and invest $1.2 million in the facility as soon as possible. The Houston High School Athletics and Art Foundation will begin fundraising and planning to eventually construct a new athletic field complex on this parcel, which will more than likely include additional student parking spaces. As you are aware, our next agenda item addresses the details of the city's shared use of this space for a period of time. The city would retain ownership of 3 acres in the southwest corner of Houston Levy Park to plan for a neighborhood park for the Dogwood Grove community and to maintain connectivity to the greenway system that runs adjacent to this property. This park location also maintains the city's desired standard of having a park within a half a mile of every home in Germantown. Of the 15 acres to the east of Forest Hill Elementary School and the school district central office building, the 12 acres shown here, referred to in the agreement as the second parcel, would be deeded to the city by the school district. The city's Natural Resource Division will proactively manage this parcel as a natural open space conservation area. This site currently has approximately half an acre of designated wetland and a detention pond on it already. The agreement includes a provision in Addendum A for the reconveyance of ownership of this second parcel back to the school district at no cost in the event the district experiences school enrollment growth above maximum capacity at the elementary or middle school grade bands throughout the entire district. This provision was included to give the school district's Board of Education reassurance that land would remain available for the purposes of elementary and middle school expansion if needed in the future. The third parcel is 5 acres of land currently owned by Taylor Land investors along the Norfolk Southern Railroad just east of Forest Hill Irene Road. Per the agreement, this land would be deeded to the city in order for the city to pursue an elevated water tower at this location. A number of easement requirements were included as part of the agreement to allow for this construction work and the ongoing maintenance of this particular use. And the fourth parcel is the remaining 3 of the 15 acres behind Forest Hill Elementary School in the far northeastern corner of the parcel. This site borders property owned by Taylor Land investors to the north and will be deeded to Taylor Land investors by the school district to be included in their single-family home subdivision plans going forward. This property is currently zoned residential estate, and the city anticipates a rezoning request of the property to residential in the near future for consistency with the rest of the land to the north. The agreement also addresses the need to remove a utility easement on the southern end of the 3-acre site. This will be completed by the city with the cooperation of the school district. This land exchange agreement and the related land use agreement fulfill a number of strategic objectives within the 9 key performance areas of our Forward 2030 strategic plan. For the sake of time, I've highlighted 3 within your agenda material pertaining to excellence in education and sustainable city services and the conservation and dependability of our natural resources. Mayor and Board, this agreement is a huge win for the people who live, work, and play in our city. And all those involved in its formation are excited about what you have before you this evening. The school district finally gets to move forward with all that's involved with their vision and capital planning efforts of expanding their high school campus. And the city gets 12 acres of natural land to preserve. We take another step towards a beautiful single-family home subdivision immediately adjacent to our new state-of-the-art elementary school. And we take a huge leap towards something our city has needed for decades, a site for an elevated water tower on the east side of the city. I would conclude by thanking Mr. John Duke with Taylor Land Investors, the school district's administration and legal counsel, our city's economic and community development, public works, parks and recreation staff, and city attorney McCarroll, and especially attorney Josh Lawhead. Each played a key role in turning this revised agreement around in just a matter of weeks. Staff and I are available for any questions you may have regarding the land exchange agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Heisman. On a personal note, I would just issue a thanks on my behalf and on Minnie's behalf for the yeoman's amount of work that you've done for the better part of a year in trying to work and bring 2 organizations together as it relates to land swap, land use, parks, ball fields, many different things. You have been steadfast with your level of patience and your stick-to-itiveness, and it is much appreciated, especially when you have to work with all those different partners. So thank you so much, Mr. Heisman. I would remind the board, if you would, please recall, and also for staff as well, in any discussion or debate, to field questions and comments through the board chair and to be very respectful of each other's time and comments. Is there a motion to approve a revised agreement with the Germantown Board of Education and Taylor Land Investors General Partnership, whereby the parties to the agreement would convey between and amongst themselves a total of 4 parcels as detailed in the land exchange agreement? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
There is a motion by Alderman Gibson and a second by Vice Mayor Yonda. Alderman Gibson, would you like the floor?
I would. Got a couple of questions. Mr. Heisman, I know that throughout the ebb and flow of these conversations, there was some discussion about 6.5 acres along that Poplar Pike frontage.
Please direct your questions to the chair.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
If
Go
you-
ahead, Mr.
thank you.
Heisman, if you'd care to answer that question.
So what was initially presented by Mr. Duke
Get that microphone just a little bit close. There you go.
by Mr. Duke was 3 acres, knowing that that's what was needed for an elevated water tower site. Through the process, there is an additional 3.5 or so to add up to the 6.5 that you're talking about that stretches along the railroad at the northern part of that boundary. The agreement includes 5 acres. 5 acres is a requirement of the city in order to have a legal lot, which we will need as a city to be able to go through the process of approval for an elevated water tower. So it was increased to 5 acres. We anticipate, I don't want to speak out of turn, but we anticipate that there's going to be a parkland requirement as part of that subdivision that he will have to meet, and Mr. Duke, Taylor Land Investors, would have received credit for that parkland. The balance of whatever's not used for the elevated water tower would go towards that.
Thank you, Mr. Heisman. Further questions for staff? Alderman Gibson?
The very short answer that I want to hear is that we'll have 6.5 acres over there. Is that correct or not?
Mr. Heisman?
The very short answer is that eventually, through the development contract and through that process, the city will end up with 6.5 acres. That's what we anticipate. But at this point, 5
It's
is
fine.
included as part of this agreement.
Correct, as part of this particular transaction, correct?
Thank you.
Yep.
That is correct.
Yeah, thank you. You continue, you have the floor, Alderman.
Thank you, if I could. Mr. Heisman, again, in having those conversations over, it feels like forever, but I know it hasn't been quite that long, to try to really get to a solution that brought the best forward as far as being able to move public utility away from that school location, which is where even on the 13th that we had planned for it to go, for it to be able to go back towards commercial. This did feel like a win for not only for the district, but also for neighbors, which I know is not necessarily the concern of the district, but again, to be able to have a neighborhood behind that school. And then, again, what I see as the real plus is being able to have that, that area, that frontage that would be served for a dog park, certainly for us humans to be able to use as well. But wanted to thank you for your patience in meeting with me more times than I can count. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Gibson. Does that conclude your time?
It does.
Thank you. Alderman Yonda, would you like the floor at this time?
No, I'll pass at this time.
Okay. Floor is open for discussion. Anybody? Alderman Sanders.
Well, I have several things, Mayor. I guess first, maybe I should address what we spoke about in the executive session, that I am concerned, as I stated in January, with the original agreement, that all these negotiations went on over the period of 12 months without your aldermen being involved. Several proposals were sent over from GMSD to the city, and they were not shared with this body. And eventually, in January, the majority of this board approved a land swap agreement, which I would ask at the conclusion of that meeting, did you sign that agreement?
There was not an agreement to sign and send over. I'll have to ask and defer to legal.
It was a proposal.
A proposal? Yep. That's correct. It was not executed.
Was not accepted by anybody, was not binding on anybody, because it would take 2 parties to enter into a binding agreement.
Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead.
That proposal, though, was adopted by the majority of this board, and it was not transmitted to GMSD for their action. Is my understanding correct?
To my understanding, that is correct, that the leadership at GMSD, once they were shared with Mr. Duke's proposal, they were willing to hear that out and to look to see if it could be restructured to something that would benefit all the parties involved.
And you would agree, would you not, that Mr. Duke has no authority to speak for the city, on behalf of the city?
Mr. Duke brought forth an idea, a proposal, and an offer to exchange land and to bring forth a compromise. To me, that's being a good neighbor and a good partner. He does not represent the city of Germantown in executing matters.
So I just want the public to know that I voted against the original agreement, and I listed several reasons why. But as far as this proposal, this amended or revised land exchange agreement, I'm disappointed. I do not believe your administration had the authority to not go ahead and send that over to the school board for their consideration. At a minimum, I believe this board should have been polled or asked, would we be willing to hold that agreement and pursue this revision? And as far as I know, that was not done. I did meet with Mr. Duke at his request, and I told him this very thing, that I was not agreeable to approving anything until I heard from GMSD what their opinion was on the original agreement that had already been approved by the majority of this board. And that's what I think should have happened. So I do have some other questions after saying that. I noticed on Exhibit D on this revision, it shows a 12-inch water line and maybe an 8-inch water line also being run along this roadway towards that portion of property that a potential water tower may be built upon. Why is that not a 24-inch water line that we were told was needed and already buried over on the school property?
Mr. Mills, if you'd like to answer that question.
So we reached out to a consultant that we're looking at to do this work for us. It's closer to the ridge line, closer to the 12-inch and also closer to the 24-inch, and not as far distance east as the previous one was. So we feel like we can get away with that equivalent of 20 inches of water instead of 24.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Go ahead, you have the floor, Alderman.
I know my time's running short. I just want to point out to the public that this board approved a reimbursement to the school board for the 24-inch line that was placed there without our taking action to lay that line, and that amount of money is equal to if our property tax
Your time is concluded, sir.
equals-
You'll have a second opportunity at the floor. The floor is open for further comments or questions, discussion. Anybody? Alderman Massey?
What we learned in our executive session tonight prior to the regular meeting is that the city administrator essentially overrode the directives of the board and mayor and aldermen to have the school board consider the proposal that was passed on January 13th. And what we have done, or what the administration, in my opinion, has done, is usurp the authority of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. And the only conclusion I can reach is, for the purpose of that agreement, is to essentially coerce the school board into accepting a deal that they represent as a compromise. But you know, it's not a compromise. Either way, they're losing out. You know, a bullet to the heart or a bullet to the head, either way, you're dead. That kind of extortive tactic is not good, and I think this looks a lot like political gangsterism, frankly. There's no reason that the city of Germantown, and let me say this, by the way, the city officials were responsible for starting our school system. They had the responsibility to make sure that the girls had equal access to activities and sporting facilities, and today those facilities don't exist, and the school board is concerned about being in violation of Title IX. The city and the school board or the schools have used those fields behind the high school for a number of years. The appropriate thing for the city to do is make right the wrongs that they created by not assuring equal access to girls' sports facilities from the very beginning. We can either sell or we can lease those sports facilities to GMSD, and then they can use them for girls' sports. But it is highly inappropriate for us to hold those fields hostage, essentially, in order for the city, and now the mayor's friend, to gain access to land that is owned by the school system. And make no mistake, that's exactly what's going on. The developer was not included in in the first land agreement. The administration had the Board of Mayor and Aldermen pass that agreement, which they then used to coerce the school, or are now attempting to coerce the school with, to get them to agree to give this developer land that the school now owns. Highly inappropriate. I personally think there should be an investigation not only into the city's attempt to get the school to pay for the water line that will now not be used. I want to know who was responsible for that. And I think somebody needs to look at whether or not it was legal for the city administrator to simply ignore the directives of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to give the agreement that was approved at the January 13th meeting to the school board. At that point, the school board could have then amended that agreement and sent it back to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and we could have actually heard what the school board wants. But that's not the way this is working. It's not the way it worked when the mayor attempted to have the school site put on Winchester. The administration continues to overstep its authority and push its own directives upon the school board without any real meaningful oversight from the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. We know that you have 3 aldermen who have private meetings. They're told how to vote, and that's what they do.
What is your
Absolutely out of order and out of line.
It's absolutely true.
Definitely.
Not true.
It is true.
absolutely not true. You are wrong. You are totally.
Can we eject him?
Point of order is being germane. Is that correct? Absolutely. Okay. I would concur with you. Please stay on focus, on topic. Nancy, you do have.
I have requested documents relevant to the school site, both on Winchester and the one on Forest Hill. You've denied me access to that information. That's exactly right.
This agreement, not on any previous ones. Go ahead, continue.
No, but the Board of Mayor and Aldermen needs to see those documents that were redacted. We need to know what other agreements were made by the city administrator or you in these private meetings.
We are currently on item 11 on the agenda.
That's right,
Agreement
Mayor.
revised GMSD and Taylor Land Investors Land Exchange.
Yep, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Please stay to the item on the agenda.
I want to see those documents. This vote tonight, I requested last time that the vote be postponed. You wouldn't postpone it. You moved through knowing that the school board wouldn't approve that.
You have now concluded your time on the floor. The floor is open. Vice Mayor, did you want to speak?
I tell you, if we want to hear a bunch of bunk, we just heard it. That's what I can tell you. As crazy as showing, he needs to tuck it in.
The Alderman Yonda,
I didn't mention his
we're
name.
on item 11 on the agenda this evening. If you'd like the floor on the agreement, go
This
ahead.
agreement is much better than the last agreement. It's better for the school board. It's better for the homeowners around the community. They have signed off on it. The assistant city administrator has worked with the school board representatives and their lawyer, and this is what's been brought before us. If you don't like it, vote against it. And that is also what the school board would do if they don't like it. But it has to go through us first. This other one that you all are worried about, this is much better. Are you saying that when we find a better idea or a better deal that we're supposed to ignore it? That doesn't make sense to me. And if we don't like this, we vote it down, and the other one moves forward. But I guess it was the week after we voted it that this came to us. It's easy to figure out that this is a better deal. I mean, it's just, and when we, I doubt very seriously as many people on this board worked for the schools as I did, but we didn't know that they, for 25 years, that the girls did not have, access to their own field. Didn't come up. 25 years, and now our school board is trying to correct that, and we're trying to help them do it. The school board did not pay for a pipe. We paid. The citizens of the community paid for it. I'm in awe of either like it or don't like it. It can go right back to where it was before. There's been nothing done maliciously by our school board, by our city administrator, the teamwork that our staff have done. The staff has done a remarkable job over the last months. And I mean, just because you're not paying attention doesn't mean things aren't going in the right direction. It's just incredible to me how great this is that everybody has virtually signed off on it. And I have talked to a majority of the school board that do think that this is in the right direction for them. And if it's not, they can vote no for it. So let's concentrate on this. Let's not get on innuendos and literally outright bunk, so to speak, to try to use a better word than what I really want to use. This is the foundation that I'm on. This is good for them. They're going to be able to move forward and get the ball field going for the girls. It's a no-brainer. There's just nothing that I feel has been done malicious, and I think the majority of the board feels this way. And as the citizens, if they look at this and see a better deal, they're going to like that too. It's going to be in a better location. It has less objection from the citizens, and it's closer to the ridge. So let's move on it. That's it, Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Alderman Owens, you have been the only person not to speak during this first round of discussion. Would you like to have the floor?
I would. Thank you,
Okay.
Mayor. I'd like to apologize to our residents for losing my temper. I try to pride myself on having more composure than that, and when I feel attacked, I get defensive, and I apologize. I've been criticized for being a cheerleader. I think a better word is an advocate, and I believe we all of us up here on this dais should be advocates for our city. This type of debate is not helpful. It's not good for our city, and so again, I make that apology. I have a couple of questions for you, Mr. Heisman, if I may.
Sure, Alderman, go ahead.
I had a good conversation with a school board member today, and we were talking through, and I think I might have misunderstood, or maybe the information that I got wasn't quite correct. But it was alluded that the school board would not have the ability to use the property at the Houston High School for a period of 10 years. But that's not correct. In my understanding and my conversation with you afterwards, we have 10 years with which to find a location, as I understand it, for one softball field or for softball facilities. But could you talk a little bit about that based on our conversation this afternoon?
Thank you, Alderman. And Director, if you could direct that through the chair, the answer, go ahead.
So as soon as, if the agreements were agreed and by all parties and we went to closing, the land, the 21.8 acres would be deeded to the school district. It would be their property to do as they see fit. As we get into land use, that talks about our ability to be able to use that land for girls softball programming for a period of a maximum of 10 years. In the event that we're able to find alternative locations for that programming before then, we would provide written notice and we would no longer be there. So that land is their land to do as they see fit. And we would just ask that if it is reconfigured or redeveloped before that 10-year period of time, they would provide space for that program to continue to use that space while we find alternative locations.
There's been discussion of those two fields to the south being converted to lacrosse, but also hold and maintain the ability to multi-purpose those. I know women's softball does not have an elevated mound. It has a regular flat mound. So those things could be done. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mayor. That's the discussions that have been had. That initial just dreaming concepts would maximize the use of that land and provide for multi-purpose uses on that site for a number of sports. The primary one, as mentioned before, would be lacrosse, given it's now sanctioned.
Thank you. Alderman, I apologize for taking some of your time. Go ahead, you have the floor.
You did take up some of my time.
Sure.
So, can you talk about, I know you've been working closely with the school administration, and in their strategic plan, I know we've heard from their Arts and Athletic Foundation that they would very much like to have this property with which they could move forward with master planning on the site. And we talked a little bit about the school's strategic plan today. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Director?
Sorry, Mayor.
Mayor, Director Douglas and I serve on the Facilities Master Planning Committee, and that planning committee has a objective to have their athletic sports on their campus. It's a primary objective of theirs. And so our discussions amongst administrations and working with their legal counsel has centered on not just a particular plot or a plat on this, but the entire property, so that they could be able to move forward with that and begin doing the fundraising through their foundation and begin to allocate dollars towards a bigger picture, to do the design work and start working in that direction. So that is a major objective of their plan.
Thank you, Mr. Heisman. You have the floor, Alderman.
Thank you, Mayor. I too would like to thank all the people who worked on this, yourself, Mr. Heisman, the school's administration. I thank Mr. Duke for presenting this option to us, because I'm a firm believer that this is a win-win situation. I stated this in executive session, but I'm grateful that the administration brought this back as a revised document, because it is, in my opinion, a better agreement for the neighborhood, without a doubt. It is a better agreement for the city, and it is a better agreement for the school. As Alderman Gibson talked about, it moves that utility away from the school. It gives us a desperately needed, dependable water tower for our safety concerns that we have. It provides for land conservation. And it also helps to create or add on to, I guess, a quality subdivision. I think it's a better location for the proposed towers for all parties, and is a better land swap.
Thank you, Alderman. That concludes your time on the floor. Everyone has spoken once. Is there anyone who would like to have further discussion on this particular item? Alderman Sanders.
Thank you. Finishing where I left off, my nearest calculation to let the residents know of the pipe that we reimbursed in January is the entire amount of property tax that we received from approximately 160 homes, basing that on the average home value in Germantown. So that's a lot of money that we reimbursed for a pipe that goes to nowhere. I do agree that this potential location next to the railroad track would be a better location for a water tower. I indicated in January that I was not for a water tower on the school property. I encourage the school board to reject this proposal, because I believe it will pass this body tonight. I don't have time to go into all of my reasoning, but I encourage you to look at our meeting that occurred in January. So you will hear all the reasons that I did not believe this land exchange in the subsequent land agreement was in your best interest. Mayor, I ask, if this agreement is ultimately passed for us to build this water tower, are we constructing a portion of Mr. Duke's roadway into his subdivision? Because in my discussions with him, he indicated that that would probably have to occur for us to build that water tower.
Thank you, Alderman. I would defer to Director Mills or Director Mills, fine? Okay. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, yes, we would have to build a roadway to get in there to do our work, and our purpose is to just build the base of the roadway so that the heavy trucks can get the materials in and out to build our tank. We'll build it on the alignment as Mr. Duke needs for his roadway, and we'll convey that to him once we're done.
So there wouldn't be two separate roadways, there would be just one.
I would use that alignment that he has so that he can use that base for the roadway. And it also benefits us down the road. We'll have to work on that tank from now on. And so we'll need a beefier, heavier built road to be able to sustain the traffic to get in and out to the tank. So we'll have the base that we need because we built it. He'll just take it over and finish it with the asphalt and the curb work.
Thank you. Go ahead, you have the floor.
Question, Mayor, is the city going to have to incur any cost as far as surveying and laying out this roadway? Are we installing any improvements such as curb and gutter that would normally be installed? And what would be our estimate of cost for the city to build this portion? I know you can't give an exact cost, but about what would it cost the city to do what
Sure, thank
Mr.
you for your
Mills is-
questions. We may have to follow up with that. I don't know if you have the ability to make that estimate at this time. Director Mills, you're shaking your head, so I take it you're not able to make that estimate?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. I don't know the exact alignment and what the grade topography would be
Sure.
of that alignment. Until we know that, we can't get those kind of estimates.
And regardless of whose property, you would have to have a road to get to somewhere to fix something, correct?
And as Administrator Heisman just reminded me, once this road is finished and Mr. Duke builds it and gets it complete, and it goes through its one-year warranty period, then it becomes a public asset. It'll be a public street. So we will be maintaining that street and taking care of it, so we want to build it appropriately.
Unless it's a private drive, but I don't think that's the
No,
game
he-
plan there.
Our understanding from the developers, he does want this to be a public subdivision.
Got you. You have the floor,
So
Alderman.
the other part of that question was, will we be conducting a survey to determine where this road will actually be, or is that going to be Mr. Duke's responsibility?
Director?
I'm sorry, I should have addressed that. We have asked Mr. Duke to give us that alignment, so his survey guys will give us that alignment.
Thank you, Director. You have the floor.
Just in the short time that I have left, I'd just tell the citizens and those residents over there that I do agree that there's a better location for the water tower, but I promise I will not be voting for a water tower on the school property if this agreement is ultimately voted down by the school board.
Thank you, Alderman. Further discussion on this particular item? Alderman Gibson, Alderman Massey? Alderman Massey?
Sure. So to Alderman Owen's point earlier, there is a real conflict on the board between us at times, and I apologize if things did get heated as well. Alderman Owens feels like, you know, we should be advocates for the cities. But in my opinion, and the way I treat my responsibilities as alderman, is I believe we should be advocates and defenders of the citizens of Germantown and the rule of law. And so I think at times the values that are represented on the board are aligned with government, and then you have aldermen who are more aligned with the citizens of Germantown. And from what I see in what the administration is trying to accomplish by first ignoring the directives that we gave them on January 13th and to get some input on the record from the school board, is to simply force the school board to accept
Hey,
what
Mayor,
the
is this
administration.
Do you consider this germane?
Go ahead.
Do you
Point-
consider his
Point of
conversation
order.
germane?
Point of order, and he needs to
Point-
stop my time.
Point of order. Go ahead. You can stop the time. What's your
Now,
point of
and he
order?
needs to add
What-
10
Point of
seconds
order is
back
this
on.
germane? He's going on about everything he was talking about earlier. This doesn't have anything to do with this particular
I would,
decision.
Vice Mayor, thank you for that point of order. I would say that in this particular situation that there a little bit of leeway can be issued. This is a four-way land swap, 3 different partners, but I would also state that, Alderman Massey, please, we're on item 11, and if you could stick as close to that as possible. Go
Point
ahead
of
and
order,
start.
Mayor.
Yes. What is your point of order?
Alderman Yonda and.
Point of order, sir.
Well, that's a dilatory motion that, or objection that Alderman Yonda is making. He consistently does this to interrupt me and throw me off and it needs to be stopped. It's clearly dilatory. If we need to check with the parliamentarian, I think we can, but he's just trying to obstruct.
Point of order can be called by any board member at any particular time. That's part of the rules.
It's not a rule, though, for them to make dilatory objections just to interrupt and obstruct.
You have the floor, and currently, I'd ask the clock to start, please.
So from my perspective, the real beneficiary of this agreement is developers, and it's the development of the future smart growth areas. The water tower is needed for the apartments that are planned for the area along Winchester, the new subdivisions. We don't have to have a water tower, by the way. And there's no reason for the school board to be forced into swapping land. Again, the city of Germantown should do the right thing and either sell, lease, or convey the property, the athletic fields that exist behind Houston High School for girls' athletics. That issue in and of itself should be a separate vote. There's no reason for it to be tied to this land swap unless the goal is to coerce the school board into accepting what the administration wants. And what the administration wants is to build a water tower for the benefit of developers. Well, I don't believe that's in the public interest. And I don't think the actions the city administrator took in ignoring our directives was in the public interest. I think that that is the root of a lot of the problems we have in Germantown, quite frankly, is that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen is not directing the legislation. They are simply rubber stamping the directives from the mayor's office. The people of Germantown are not being represented that way. Now, I agree that the site along the railroad tracks is preferable to the site that was chosen for the water tower at Forest Hill Elementary. But that begs the question, who made the decision to put that water line on school property for the purpose of building a water tower there without knowing that the school board was going to allow a water tower to be built there? That's malfeasance, in my opinion. And I want to know who overstepped their authority and made that decision. Right, somebody put the cart way before the horse because you decided to put a water line on school property, which you had the school pay for. Alderman Sanders said we reimbursed it, but originally they paid for it. So we really wouldn't be here tonight had somebody not been acting like a loose cannon and chosen school property as a site for a water tower for the benefit of developers. I'll say again, I think there should be an investigation into what has taken place here. We don't have the means to investigate and demand the documents that go back years to when these agreements were made in secret with the people in Forest Hill Heights to use city resources to help put that infrastructure in place. I think it's very important that we get all the documents, including those that were withheld and redacted from me when I requested them. There should be an investigation.
Your time is concluded, Alderman. Any further discussion on this item? Alderman Gibson.
Thank you, sir. As far as the process goes, in meeting with school board members and conversing with school board members, I've actually spoken with each of the board members once this new proposal came forward, circled back with several of them after they had met with Mr. Duke or had conversations with him, and still believe that this is the best foot forward. I would like to speak for a moment about some misstatements that that have been made. One by my colleague in position 3, as far as the water pipe, the pipe not being used, and Chair, to Mr. Mills, to find out Is that pipe being used? Of course it is. And actually, let me go ahead and use some of my time, and then I'll weigh in if you need to. Of course that pipe is being used. The school is using it now. It is not a pipe to nowhere. It is being currently used.
Yes, what is your point of order?
Well, Alderman Gibson referenced me.
What is your point of order?
Well, she made a misstatement that needs to be corrected. She said that I made the reference to a pipe to nowhere. That was actually Alderman Sanders, and he sits in position.
Duly noted. I concur. Continue with the floor, Alderman.
Thank you. Thank you. The pipe is being used, and of course, Alderman position 1 did mention it being a pipe to nowhere. That is correct. It is a pipe to somewhere. It's being used by the school now. The cost differential between a 24-inch pipe and a pipe that would not necessarily have been thought for public use, the cost differential is about $102,000. I don't ever put the words only in front of that kind of money. It's not something that I do in my personal life. It's certainly not something that I do in my city life. But it is not a pipe that is to nowhere. It's not a pipe that's not being utilized today. Would also like to address words that have been used tonight, such as gangsterism. That's a new one. I think that we are seeing those words being said tonight in a public forum that have been whispered before, possibly put on social media, and so for us to be able to address those this evening it's important. It's important for me to be able to say that when I meet.
What is your point of order, sir?
Well,
You're not being dilatory, are you?
no, sir.
All right, well, go ahead. What's your point of order?
So any other time that I'm speaking
What's your
off
point of
topic,
order,
they
quickly?
make a point to say that it's not germane. I just
Thank you.
would.
Thank you. I concur. Please stay on topic, Alderman.
Thank you, and Mayor, the
That's item 11. I'm sorry.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mayor. Just the justification in saying that is that conversation was brought about during this discussion, and so.
Agreed. Continue.
Thank you. The meetings that are had, whether it's about this proposal or anything else, when we meet with our staff, when we meet with other elected officials, it is, and when we meet with citizens, it is to have a better understanding of refining the process, refining the procedure, and coming to be able to bring to the public a better mousetrap, so to speak. And so
Make a motion to suspend the rules to allow us open debate on this issue. If y'all want to have a discussion
You made
about
your motion.
this, let's have it.
The motion has been made to suspend the rules. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Yes.
Alderman Gibson?
no.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
No.
Vice Mayor Yonda?
Hard no.
The motion fails, and we return to Alderman Gibson has the floor. You have about a minute and a half left. Go ahead.
Thank you. As far as, again, since we're talking about what others have said this evening, Alderman in position 5 had indicated something about what is better for GMSD. And what I would say to that is that I am not in a position to speak for what is better for GMSD. I know that they have been at the table through their representatives, their superintendent, their administration, their attorney, throughout this conversation, again, about this document that I believe meets the needs. I believe they've told us that they were looking for a transfer that meets not only the needs for their immediate use, but for what those future needs are. And so I believe that this accomplishes that. I think the GMSD board, this will go to them, and they will make that determination of what's best for them. And lastly, if I could say whether I don't believe that to be an advocate for the city of Germantown, I don't believe that's in conflict with being an advocate for the citizens of Germantown, and certainly not the rule of law. I know when I took my oath 5 years ago to represent the city of Germantown, the citizens to the best of my ability, with their best interest at heart. It was simply to make certain I did that with every decision that I made. And to say that we are gangsters in doing so is beyond the pale.
Thank you, Alderman Gibson. Any other further discussion on this particular item? Alderman Owens.
Thank you, Mayor. It is my belief that I guess, first of all, that a water tower is absolutely 100% desperately needed in our city. It has been needed since, essentially, we've been looking for a site, as my understanding, since we built the last water tower, because it is built on a two-tier system. That water tower is needed. It has nothing to do with smart growth. It has nothing to do with development.
Point of order, Mayor.
Your point of order, please.
Alderman Owens is making a misrepresentation, and I have the documentation to prove that. He's saying that this is not related to smart growth, and I actually have documents going back a number of years that show that it is exactly related to smart growth.
I do not concur. You are debating and not calling on a particular rule at this time. So, Alderman Owens, you have the floor, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to, Bo, would you speak to the need for a water tower and how long we have needed that water tower? And
Alderman, thank you. If you could direct your comments through the chair, Director Mills.
Yes, sir, Chair. We've been talking about a water tower since 1970. My first year at the city was 1985, and we were trying to site a water tower at that time. Again, the master planning for our city built the Johnson Road Water Treatment Plant in the early 2000s, and we were looking for an opportunity to actually construct an elevated tank at that site. It is a balancing issue. It is a redundancy issue for our system, and also just resiliency so that we can bounce back in the event of a natural disaster of some sort. So those have been the purposes.
Thank you, Director. If you could also speak to the occurrence in August of 2014 on how close we came to losing our system.
Yes, sir, Chair.
With your indulgence, Alderman.
no, that's one of my notes.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, sir, Chair. We had a perfect storm that day. Actually, a storm did occur about 5:30 that morning. It knocked the power out to the Southern Avenue Water Treatment Plant. The generator started, and when the generator sent the signal to the transfer switch to kill MLGNW and to start generator flow, the switch actually blew up and burned. So we were not able to power the water plant there at Southern Avenue, which means we couldn't pump water out of our existing reservoirs or make more water to push it into the water tower and keep our head pressure, our elevated water pressure in our city. Staff was there immediately. It was just a caution for us. We turned everything on at Johnson Road and tried to push water 5 miles away back into our tank, and we simply could not. Our residents were using more water than we could push back up into that tank. The water level actually dropped out of the bowl of the tank and down into the neck. Pressures around the high school, Germantown High School, dropped to within 20 pounds of pressure, which has severely affected our fire officials' ability to fight fires. And people were saying they couldn't flush their toilets on their second floor because there just wasn't enough water pressure. We came that close to getting air in our system. With another elevated tank out east, we could have managed the system completely. We would have had the redundancy to be able to just let that tank and tower supply the head pressure to keep pressure on the entire city.
And the importance of not having air in the system, the hammering, I think it's referred to as.
That's correct. If air does get into our water main pipes, it's much like if you've had plumbing work done at your house and they cut the water off at the street, made your plumbing repairs, turned the water back on, and you open your faucet. You hear that air, that poof, 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 as that air comes out of your system. It'd be the same thing in our water mains, but much time magnified with 8 and 12-inch water mains all over this city. That air could have blown out chunks of our main. It could even affect people's facilities inside their homes because that air would move up the service lines and go into toilets and possibly blow toilets and sprinkle water out into the floors. And I could think of all kinds of disasters that could happen with that sort of alignment.
Thank you, Director. What's your point of order?
Don't think that the presentation that your administration has given is being honest. I think it's against the
What's your
public
point of
interest.
order?
It should be
It's on rules
It
of the
needs to be
meeting.
corrected. If you're gonna,
Do not agree with you. You are overruled. You have the floor, Alderman Owens.
Thank you, Bo. I'm grateful for your your service to our city. You are an expert in your field, and I rely, as I stated previously, heavily on your opinion, and I've worked with you, and I know that you have honor and intelligence beyond. In any case, you know, these arguments about the city administration not having the authority to bring a revised agreement when they have been working closely with the school's administration, in my opinion, are disingenuous, nothing more. In my opinion, we should be celebrating a public-private partnership, but instead, we have to experience another round of the usual attacks on our administration and our staff.
What is your point of order, please?
Well, he's not being germane.
I agree
and
with
he's-
you. Please continue, Alderman Owens.
But he was able to say what he wanted to.
Alderman Owens has the floor. Please continue. You have just about less than a minute
Please
left.
stop talking to me while I'm talking.
Alderman Owens, or Alderman Massey, please, Alderman Massey.
I appreciate you so much.
Please, Alderman Massey. Go ahead, Alderman Owens.
It's not surprising, as I stated. It would be really refreshing, however, if we could come together for such an obvious improvement over the last agreement and a clear win-win for our city. I just know this agreement is good for our city in so many ways. I've stated those previously, and with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Yonda, I believe if you'd like to have the floor, or we can go to a vote.
Let's go.
Please call the roll.
Alderman Owens? Vice Mayor
Yes.
Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Sanders?
That would be a hard no.
Alderman Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Thank you. The item 11 on the agenda passes, and administration does appreciate the support on that particular item. I do believe that this will be a very good compromise for so many different parties involved. Takes us to item 12 on the agenda this evening, Agreement Revise GMSD Land Use. Assistant City Administrator Heisman, you have the floor.
The land use agreement is essentially a facility usage agreement that primarily captures the details of the shared usage on the first parcel after the transfer of ownership. In summarizing the key elements of the land use agreement on the first parcel, the agreement will be in effect for 10 years or until the city has acquired and built separate softball facilities elsewhere suitable for its recreation needs and purposes, and delivers written notice to the school district that this is the case, whichever occurs first. The city will have primary use of the two southernmost athletic fields for recreational programming, and the school district will have secondary use of these fields. The city will have full access to the concession building and restrooms and related parking. The city will be responsible for trash service, regular maintenance, upkeep, repairs, and lighting while these fields are in their current state. The city will have secondary use of the northernmost athletic field, which is planned to become the new home field for the high school softball program. And the city will also have secondary use of the batting cage. If the first parcel is redeveloped during the term, the school district will include shared space for the city's primary use of softball fields within the new design of the athletic field complex. Upon this reconfiguration, the school district will assume all maintenance responsibilities for the remainder of the term. School district and city representatives will work together on a consistent basis to schedule the use of these facilities. For the avoidance of any doubt, language was also included in the land use agreement that the city will leave existing landscaping and tree buffers adjacent to any residential neighborhoods on the second parcel behind Forest Hill Elementary. School district administration and city staff have worked collaboratively on this proposed agreement and are both comfortable operationally with the included terms. Again, staff and I are available for any questions you may have on this land use agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Heisman, and again, thank you for your work with, I guess especially probably Deputy Director Kathy would probably be the one that you worked with the most, but also with both legal teams as well. Is there a motion to approve a revised land use agreement with the Germantown Board of Education, which defines the prioritized use of facilities on the first and second parcels as covered in the revised land exchange agreement? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion?
Second.
It's a motion by Alderman Gibson and a second by Vice Mayor Yonda on this particular agenda item, and I would just remind the board and staff to direct all inquiry and discussion through the chair. The floor is open for discussion. Alderman Sanders.
Thank you, Mayor. After the January meeting, I made a request of staff to provide figures for me for the cost of the upkeep of Houston Levy Park, because that was a concern that I expressed during that meeting. I was provided a figure that's somewhat close to $150,000. It's $146, perhaps. I don't have it in front of me, but with this new agreement, I see that that the city would maintain the 2 softball fields, the southern softball fields. So is there any idea how much that would take off, what burden it would relieve GMSD of?
Staff, are you prepared with any kind of estimates on maintenance at this particular time? I look to the Parks Director, Public Works, and our General Services Director as well. I think all three of you have a hand in that at times. Are you able to provide any estimates?
We could provide early this week. Don't have anything.
Go ahead, Administrator.
I would just comment that the large majority of those costs, I think it was nearly 100 grand, 90 grand was in ground maintenance. And while the fields are in their current state, 2 of the 3 fields would be utilized by the city, and it'd be our responsibility to take care of those grounds during the term until the property is reconfigured.
So I guess just an estimate would be that
It'd be an estimate,
2/3
but
would be borne by the city. Is that
of that expense,
approximately?
right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Continue, Alderman Sanders.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Alderman Sanders. Further discussion? Alderman Massey?
So there's been some talk tonight about some unidentified school officials agreeing that this is a positive agreement for them. But I talked to a school board member before coming to the meeting earlier this afternoon, and she said that she thought it was a terrible agreement. She said that she got the first agreement before the Board of Mayor and Aldermen ever got it, and I am not sure who presented this agreement to them, but they're looking at the agreements, but they're not being able to publicly discuss the agreements. And that's part of the problem that I have with us not following the process, is that the school board members and the people that are actually involved in these decisions are never on the public record giving their opinion and explaining why it is or is not good for them. So we don't know which school board members have indicated that they think this is a good idea, if any school board members have indicated it's a good idea.
What is your point of order, Alderman?
How is this
Vice Mayor?
germane? He either votes for it or against it. How is this germane? We'll let them decide later.
I concur. We are currently on the agreement for revised GMSD land use. Alderman, if you could speak to the agreement and continue. You have the floor.
Mayor, I'm speaking directly to the agreement. That's another dilatory motion that's being used to obstruct the citizens from hearing what I have to say. I mean, why would you agree with him?
You are not staying germane to the agenda item, which is the agreement for the revised GMSD land use. If you want to speak to those specific items and the agreement or any of the codicils or points that are included in such, that would be germane to the discussion this evening.
Mayor, I'm specifically talking about this
point of order.
agreement.
What is your point of order?
Point of order is, it's not germane what other people think about it when you're trying to make a decision on it.
I concur. Go ahead.
We're gonna
Alderman
be making a
Massey,
decision
if
on
you could
this. They
stay
can make it later.
on target here and on task.
What are you concurring with? He just doesn't agree with what I'm saying and doesn't want the people to hear it. That is a dilatory motion.
You have the floor right now. If you'd like to use the floor to discuss the item, you have the floor for that. Who was the school board member that was not for the particular item?
Mayor, I don't want to identify the school board
Okay,
member because
fine,
you'll
thank-
bully them.
that's fine.
You'll threaten them and you'll try to get them on board with this, and that's not right.
Well, thank you. Go ahead. You have the floor.
That's the kind of tactics I'm talking about. It doesn't surprise me that you'd want to know their names, though.
It's just transparent, open, engaging. I mean, you're the ones holding it back, but go ahead, you have the floor,
Okay,
sir.
well, let's add a little transparency to this, and let's have a work session with the school board members, and let's have an open discussion about that, since you're so interested in transparency. Let's do that. I make a motion to postpone this
You
vote
can do
Point of
that.
order.
until we can have a work session with the
Motion
school
has been
board.
made to postpone this, now you have to do it only until the next meeting. So the motion's been made to postpone this particular item till the March 8th meeting.
And Mayor, I would
And
like to know what your position is on this, since you said you want some transparency, so I'd like to get your support on this.
Let me continue with the motion that you've made is to postpone this particular item until March the 8th and to have a work session on the item. That's been brought forth in a form of a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Sanders.
Yes.
Alderman Gibson.
No.
Alderman Massey.
Yes.
Alderman Owens.
No.
Vice Mayor Yonda.
No.
The motion fails. You have the floor, Alderman.
So it should be clear to the public that the mayor's administration is attempting to force its will upon the school board. The vote on January 13th.
Point of information, what does that have to do with this?
The Alderman Yonda,
Is it germane?
Please, just calm down here. Alderman, you are on this particular item, agreement for the revised GMSD land use. Please remain germane to that specific item, and then you have the floor. If I have to warn you again, I will remove your time from the floor. Go ahead.
On what grounds, Mayor?
That you're not staying germane to the topic. You have the floor, sir.
Mayor, who are the partners in Taylor Land Investors?
Mr. Heisman, the partners in the particular Taylor Land Investment GP, do you have that information?
That's point of order. That has nothing to do with the land use agreement, Mayor.
I will grant that just because this is part of a multiple parcel swap with multiple partners as well. Do you have that information, Mr. Heisman?
Yes, Mayor, it's Mr. John Duke and Marcia Waddell.
Thank you, sir. Continue. You have the floor.
And when did Mr. Duke contact you about the land swap?
Again, Mayor.
A couple of days, I guess a couple of days after the last board meeting.
Is there a record of him contacting you?
I presume that there is a record.
Well, you presume there either is or there is not. So
He
which
called
is
me
it?
on the telephone.
Can I have another point of order?
What is your point of order, Alderman?
That's not germane to the land use agreement.
Yeah, you are correct. We're on the land use agreement. If you want to stick with that, go ahead.
Well, Mayor, I would just point out that Taylor Land Investors is actually listed here on the agenda item, so I would say that Taylor Land Investors is relevant to this discussion, despite Alderman Yonda's objection.
Yeah, that's the background to tell you about it, but this is specifically the agreement for the revised land use plan. Continue. You have the
Still have
floor.
a point of order, Mayor.
What's your point of order, Alderman?
Exhibit A does attach to this agenda item, and Exhibit A is the land exchange agreement, so I do believe it's germane.
Yep, as I mentioned earlier, I'm giving some leeway, but if you could stick to the land use agreement would be great. Go ahead. You have the floor.
So in my discussions with the school board member also agreed with my opinion that the city should simply do the right thing and either convey, lease, or sell the softball complex to GMSD. They are at a loss, too, to understand why the mayor's administration seems to be holding up the conveyance of the land behind the high school in order to gain the school's land at Forest Hill Elementary. The two should be disconnected.
Your time is concluded from the floor, Alderman. Further discussion? Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Yonda.
Yes.
Alderman Sanders.
No.
Alderman Gibson.
Yes.
Alderman Massey. Alderman Owens.
Yes.
The item 12 on the agenda, the agreement for revised GMSD land use has been approved. I do want to again thank the staff and specifically Mr. Heisman and the entire team. We know that you've put in a lot of effort, energy, and we thank you very, very much. I would like to also point to our reserves this evening. Thank you, Eric and Al, for protecting us. I don't know if anyone else was here this evening. And special thanks to George Hernandez, who is the CEO of the year in the greater region. So congratulations, Mr. Hernandez. We are adjourned.